Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Roberto Corona. I am an Italian anthroposopher and astrologer, and in this video we'll talk about the first new moon of the astrological year, which is going to be a partial solar eclipse happening in the zodiac sign of Aries. Now, it is clearly not a good omen for the astrological year to start with an event like this. Now, this eclipse, in fact, officially brings us to the spring season, which kicks off the new year, restarting the wheel of the zodiac precisely with Aries. In addition to that, as you can see here, represented with a beautiful painting by Pietro Perugino, the spring season falls under the rulership of Archangel Raphael, the archangel who brings forces of healing. And I have to say we may really be in need for these forces. Now, as we saw in the last video, we have 2 eclipses scheduled for the month of March and 2 for the month of September. We have already talked in the last video about the total lunar eclipse in Virgo on March 14. In this video, we're going to tackle the partial solar eclipse in Aries taking place on March 29. Now, this is the chart of the eclipse. Let's start from the latest variations in the sky. As we know, on March 15, the day after the lunar eclipse in Virgo, Mercury turns retrograde to follow Venus towards the sign of Pisces. Then, on March 20th, the Sun enters Aries, marking the beginning of the astrological year. Then on March 27, Venus retrograde enters back into Pisces, followed by Mercury on March the 30th. And on top of that, on the same day, the day after the solar eclipse, an important celestial event takes place, as on March 30th, we have Neptune entering Aries, and we will talk about it in a future video. Now, again, we want to remember that the astrological year, which begins with the Sun entering Aries, is placed between 2 eclipses, and we want to point out that this is not a good indicator at all, but indeed it is a sign of the overall geopolitical instability that characterizes 2025. Now, this is a solar eclipse, and it means that it is different from a lunar eclipse. Now, by definition, this means that the Sun, Moon, and Earth are aligned in that order. And a solar eclipse is always a new moon, during which, as we know, the moon overshadows the sun, right? Now, being a new moon, the eclipse triggers events that have a sudden and unpredictable character. And on top of that, anthroposophy tells us that the cone of shadow that the moon projects on the Earth allows harmful entities present on our planet, on Earth, to be expelled out into the cosmos. Now, this phenomenon in general is better than that of the lunar eclipse, where nasty forces are able to enter the Earth, but we should not underestimate the fact that these forces still gather and accumulate before being thrown out. So it is a very delicate moment. It is a sort of a release valve, right? Cosmic release valve. Now, in general, as we know, eclipses change depending on the lunar node in which they occur. And as you can see here, the Sun and Moon are close to the North Node. Here's the North Node, right? It is the so-called dragon's head, which traditionally it is considered to be a little Jupiter, so to speak. And this means that it brings an expansion or an expansive and constructive quality to things. So this eclipse may be about major and sudden beginnings or events that start something new, right? Let's now take a closer look at the chart. So Sun and Moon are at 9 degrees Aries here, and they can be found in the starry image of Pisces. Now, the luminaries are in conjunction with Mercury. Here's Mercury. And Mercury is placed in a very particular position because Mercury is retrograde and also can be found at 0 degrees 28 minutes Aries. Now, this means that Mercury is basically about to re-enter back to Pisces, where it will be in both exile and fall. It is a Mercury on edge, so to speak. So we also want to notice that Neptune is at 29 degrees Pisces and 57 minutes. So basically Neptune is sitting on the so-called anaretic degree. And on top of that, as you can see, Neptune is between, almost dividing Mercury and Venus, right? Now, as you can see then, Venus follows then the North Node and Saturn. And Saturn and the North Node together, as we said, they constitute a sort of karmic configuration, which is very interesting. Now, why a karmic configuration? Because Saturn is the lord of karma, and because the nodes are where karma is released, and they are in conjunction. So we have a very strong karma signification in the chart. Now, the ruler of the eclipse is Mars, because Mars is the lord of Aries, and Mars is here, debilitated, still in Cancer, as you can see. But on top of that, Mars is in conjunction with fixed star Pollux. This is Pollux. It is the head of the immortal twin, which is a star of the very nature of Mars, a martial star. And this is not good, because Mars is sitting on a martial star. Now, Mars also makes a trine with Saturn. This is the trine with Saturn. And by the way, this is a minor grand trine, since it is in turn closed by 2 sextiles from Uranus. So minor grand trine closed by 2 sextiles here. Now, let's take a look at the meanings of the chart, starting as always from a physical perspective. First of all, the eclipse could be all about, sudden beginnings, which in Aries can be real outbursts, if not even real explosions, actual explosions. And this is because Mars, which represents will and action, is not doing great. He is debilitated in Cancer. And Mercury, which together with Uranus regulates technical functioning in general, is about to fall into Pisces. Now, this means that there could be accidents or technical malfunctions also due to the haste of the planets in Aries, but also to the fact that Mars, ruler of the eclipse, is in conjunction with star Pollux. And please note that from this perspective, Pollux can be quite dangerous, since it is traditionally connected to poisons and could, for this reason, lead to damaging the environment, or in general, to the release of toxins, right? We also want to point out that these accidents could definitely involve the water element, since the chart is full of it. Now, on the other hand, the symbolism of protection and defending the borders is again confirmed. If you remember, we have been basically talking about it in the last 2 videos. And this is because, of course, Mars is making a trine to Saturn. And together, they create a very defensive configuration, especially because Mars is in Cancer, the zodiac sign of protection, and Saturn is the lord of boundaries himself. Now, conjoining Saturn there, we find Venus, and Venus is retrograde, but she is in exaltation in Pisces. Now, this Venus will definitely try to help. However, we have to understand that she is quite limited by the conjunction with Saturn and by the fact that she is retrograde. Overall, she is a benefic planet. So Venus is probably the only planet we can count on in the chart. And she's going to try, at least, to calm people down, leading them to reevaluate the situation. This is because she's retrograde. So if you remember, reevaluating things is what Venus retrograde usually does. And this reevaluation process is especially for the benefit of protecting people in need, protecting the afflicted, if you will. Now, this brings us to the psychological meanings of the chart, because here Venus is all about trying to extinguishing with water the fire of Aries. And the main symbolism of Aries from a psychological perspective here would be anger, because it is the emotion of fire, right? And in fact, Mercury is retrograde in Aries, so misunderstandings are very easy. And it is in a very uncomfortable placement. Again, this Mercury is about to change sign. Now, what does it mean from this perspective, from a psychological perspective, that Mercury is about to go back into Pisces? It describes a sort of passage, right? It is the passage from the anger of Aries to the emotional drama of Pisces. A drama very well represented by Neptune, placed in the last degree of Pisces. The anaretic degree is an uncomfortable degree for a planet to sit on. And on top of that, again, this Neptune is in between Venus and Mercury, right? So we have this passage to drama that we should try to avoid as much as possible, especially if it is caused by sudden reactions on our part or on the part of people around us. Remember in general that the solar eclipse can easily affect our will and lead us astray. Maybe we think we are acting for the good, and maybe we're trying to protecting ourselves, but it's very easy with this fire energy and this Mercury retrograde to exaggerate, right? And this is especially the case because the star Pollux inflames the very soul of Mars. So yes, it is a debilitated Mars, but on a stellar level, we have this huge impact from Pollux. Now, from a spiritual perspective, the sun is partially eclipsed, because this is a partial eclipse, in the starry image of Pisces up here, right? This is Pisces, the constellation. So in astrology, as we have indicated several times, Pisces, they represent the Trinitarian principle of the Father and the law of karma. I am talking about the constellation now. And this means that we find ourselves here confronting the direct consequences of what we have sown as a civilization, and which we must now face with responsibility, right? Now, the star Pollux is one of the two heads of the constellation of Gemini, so we have another impulse coming from the spiritual layer of the stars, right? And in particular, Pollux is the head of the immortal twin, who was a boxer, by the way, so a warrior. In fact, Pollux is a martial star. In this sense, Pollux, from a spiritual perspective, represents a battle. The battle of the human self, of the human I, or of our human immortal part, if you will, against the other twin, the dark twin, Castor, who represents the physical body, our mortal part, or our shadow. And this is because Gemini is precisely the constellation of dualism, that is the dimension of Earth, the dimension in which we can awake. Now, this overlap that we have nowadays between the constellation of Gemini and the tropical sign of Cancer is telling us that this shadow is a Cancer shadow. It can be, for example, the shadow of the family, the shadow of nationalism. So what does it mean? It means that our I must wake up and fight not to become easy prey of the group soul, or the folk soul, if you will, the soul of the nation, who wants to swallow us, to reduce our I to one of its extremities, to one of its appendages. And we're not. We're spiritual beings. We're not supposed to become an appendage of our nation or our family, like an extension of it, right? It is the Luciferic impulse, of course, Lucifer anthroposophically understood, that would like to reduce our spiritual self to just another extension of our family or our nation, and we are more than that. Now let's take a look at the places in the world where the eclipse will be most intense. As you know, I use astrocartography, which allows us to see where in the world the eclipse is going to be stronger. Basically, we can see here where the eclipse is going to take place on one of the 4 angles. In red, you can see the ascendant line affecting the Americas. In yellow, the descendant line affecting Indonesia, Thailand, and China. In green, the midheaven line that unfortunately falls here in Europe through Italy. And in blue, the IC line that falls basically in the middle of nowhere. Now, if we compare this chart with the actual path of the eclipse, we can see where the event will be stronger. Now, this is an image taken from the website timeanddate.com. And as you can see, the eclipse will be faintly visible from Canada, Greenland, and from Northern Europe. And this means that Canada and Northern Europe are definitely more involved, but also Greenland, considering everything that's happening lately there, right? As always, thanks for watching. If you want to support my work, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell not to miss out on future astrological insights. I am Roberto Corona. See you in the next video.